Welcome to our segment of Job 1 at the Career Channel at UC TV Extension. Great to have you here. Our guest today is Abeyta, PhD. This segment is really about all of the programs that UC San Diego and Extension have for young people that are finishing high school or going into high school or deciding whether to have a career or go on to college after a career. Because going to college is not the same thing today as it was before, and it's very expensive. And how do we make sure there's value there? So Ed, you've got all sorts of programs for kids, even preparing them after they've been accepted at UCSD.
Well, what we've learned is, to your point, the traditional model of going just to college is changed. There's more risks involved. Students are going to be paying a heck of a lot of money in an investment that has consequences if they're not on point and focused and ready. When we look at the national debt for students with student loans and things that's an economic crisis, frankly. When you are coming out traditionally, and let's say even 30, 40 years ago, instead of starting a family, there's a different mindset now. You're having to factor in not just your rent, but also the student debt.
Or a down payment on a house.
And that's scary. And for parents and for educators and for our national leadership, we've got to start rethinking. It's not just about going to college. We're not saying that going to college is not the thing to do. It's how we prep the pipeline, the talent pipeline. In high school, that's where we come in. So at Extension, we have always prided ourselves to being lifelong learners, but really, we started at 25. There was a model we used to have is once you got out of college, then you sustain through Extension, whether it's a certificate, lectures.
Something you had to have. Right. Your boss said, go get this certificate, learn this, right?
You got it. And so what we're actually looking at, really, let's start a little earlier. Why does lifelong learning have to start at 25 when we can instill this at a younger age? And so that was kind of the premise of pre-college programming. How do you actually engage students before they even get to UCSD, whether they go to UCSD or not?
Is this the right university for them?
And it may not be. In fact, we even have to question whether or not students out of high school should go right into college, or should they take a time out.
A gap year, which is very common in Europe, that you take a gap year before jumping into the university.
You got it. And Israel, there's other countries that do this approach. What we're trying to do right now is engage students that they're not getting into high school to just check boxes. There's this whole notion in California and the UC system to get A through G. Let me check off my English, let me check off my math. But we're really assisting students to engage for the world of work. And so when we look at lifelong learning, one of the most important things that we're trying to look at and why UCSD is interested is we want to make sure when students get into college that they're ready and they have a little bit more purpose and mindset for what they're getting into. So they can avoid this switching majors and other things because times have changed. But most importantly, what we found is instilling a sense of lifelong learning at an earlier age and exposing them into some of the things that we've done for adults, which is really important. What we're doing right now is bringing certificate programs that have been traditionally focused just for adults, and we're moving them into the high school realm. So a student, for instance, in our partners with the San Diego Library called Library Next, a student actually can work in a computer science area and end up with a front-end web development, iOS programming certificate, or Android. And that's their first job. They're getting engaged with industry so that perhaps if they went into a college university setting, they could actually focus on computer science with real purpose.
And is this extracurricular activity you're encouraging on evenings and they're still going through the high school, or is this integrated into their 8 in the morning till 3:30
Both.
In the afternoon?
In some respects, we're starting to find some school partnerships that's integrated into the day. But then there's other areas where, with our library, where students don't have time or they have sports, other things that are conflicting, they can go on weekends. It's the same model that we have for adults. But this notion that...
Are you blending adults and children?
Not yet.
Into the same program? Not yet.
Not yet, but that has surfaced.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. It was interesting when we started out this program pilot about it was 2 years ago actually. We wanted to see if this notion that could we actually do adult classes and bring them into the high school setting. So we started out for a long process. We ended up with Python. It was a good platform for a lot of other computer science realms. And we not only sold out all these courses, but then we found out these parents were in libraries hanging out. and they had a lot of questions.
Is Python an online educating system? What
It's actually a programming language that students in person, they can write programming, and the other
Using Python.
Using Python, the platform. So we not only found that they were engaged, and the thing that kind of made it special is we said to the students, what big problem do you want to solve by learning this? So in other words, it's not just learning Python, but is there something they
What are
can
you
use?
going to do with it?
Yeah, what's a problem you can solve in our community? Which gets to a different area of thinking about, how do I serve my community? And it started to work, but back to the parents, we had this notion of just teaching the kids and the parents would go away. No, they hung out. So we started hearing, oh wow, we have an opportunity now to capture the students and their parents, and what libraries turned out is not just buildings with books, they're actually a community convener. So that we not only have the parents, we have the students, and that's where UCSD starts to come in. What we learned in the library as a partner, one of our examples of partners aside from other schools, is that they had a problem. They had these great taxpayer buildings, that these rooms were maybe underutilized in some respects, but the librarians and the community leaders in the libraries know their audience. They have these connections to their community. We had the opposite problem. We had all these resources at UCSD, but how do we get into the community and actually deliver these?
Great partnership.
So the partnership was just a match. We actually have come up with a whole host of just workshops and the certificate programs called Program Your Future that enable students to not only go into these convening for community stations, if you will, but the parents, to their point, we actually think in the future we'll be actually integrating that is an interesting stay tuned moment.
And the relevancy of it, right? I'll study
Relevancies.
something and understand it if I know how I think I'm going to use it. I may not know how I'm going to use it because it could be different patterns. Let's go back to the A to G, because there's a controversy in high schools about there's legislation that every student has to graduate with certain courses that qualify them to go on to the UC level. Right? Every student that graduates from San Diego Unified should be able to apply to a university like UC San Diego and qualify.
Right.
And then there's students who say, I don't want to do that. I want to work with my hands. Where are you on that issue, whether it should be mandatory or optional?
I think as we look forward, again, checking boxes in A through G is not the recipe for what we need to start thinking about of educating our youth for the next generation. It's not only being college ready, having an A through G, but also are you ready in your own soft skills and career ready. And career ready is not what the typical check boxes, which some think about just resumes and going to some workshops, maybe a summer internship. It's having this notion of relevancy and a propensity for lifelong learning. And the word relevancy is something that's really emerging in our area of UC and in the workplace, to understand that your biology degree or your physics degree has a shelf life. And that, as we know, the only way to keep up with rapid changes is relevancy. So it's not a one and done in going to college.
Right.
Many of our industry leaders know that you've got to keep your skill sets up and engaged. And that's why we want to get early on connected into the community with UCSD and the community of high school and mid school, because we understand that this is just one point in their overall lifespan. Pre-college, we're getting them ready for career and college ready. Then perhaps if they do choose to step out and go into the workforce, that's okay. Perhaps they come back into UC, get their degree. That's one area, but then there's a whole notion of sustainability of relevancy, and that's where I think Extension is really excelling in our certificates, our lecture series, our ongoing engagement with knowledge and new knowledge that's emerging. And then we even have our 55 and older, what we call OSHER, the great encore of learning, where you can retire, but you still want to be engaged. I think there's not one answer to say it's right or wrong yet, but we do have to think about our system as it is, that if we're actually putting kids in, even if they're qualified with all their A through G, their activities and their strong admission packets and scores on tests, are we really producing them ready to get to college, or are we actually preparing them for overall life, career, and college, and perhaps life readiness?
First is preparing them for defeat.
Exactly.
I started school, I dropped out, I was uncomfortable, nobody looked like me. You know, that whole issue, first time away from home, first time in a new community, university of 30,000 students all at once.
Yes.
Or these days, maybe I learn better online than I do sitting in a classroom.
And some of the high school students would actually say, I got just as much reading, not just reading some book or pamphlet or online, but I watched about 5 YouTube videos that took half the time at no cost to accomplish an area of discipline or knowledge that I didn't have to go to class or go on campus, fight for parking, find my classroom, and so on.
No, it's a huge trend. Let's go to and share with me the name of the program where you bring students who have been accepted at UC San Diego, but this may be their first member of the family that's going on to college. It's a huge transition I was just talking about. Mm-hmm. And it's a great summer program. What is the name of that? And tell us
Academic
more about
Connections. That. And so we've been working in the high school at actually called Academic Connections, where we bring the stellar students around the region. And actually this last year we had over 13 countries and 28 states. But it's really a mimic of what a real college experience would be.
Do they have to be accepted to UC San Diego to attend, or is it for just to prepare them for college at anywhere in their community?
The latter.
Okay.
Because we want to make sure whether they get into UC or not, that this experience gives them a whole insight in preparing them for what it looks like to be on college campus, and really the inside success stories to help them navigate once they step on the campus. So little things that trip up students when they come to college is just understanding the landscape. They may know how to write, but some may not understand the pace of how fast things go. Or the first time that they're doing the laundry on their own, or how to eat.
I remember those days.
And then there's also some things that...
Or not knowing a soul.
Exactly.
Right?
How to engage with others, make new friends. But what we found is the big confidence builder, and what is the big takeaway is the connections with other students. What we find is that social change and that personal development that they gain of having to, I get the college. They just don't get it until you're on campus and you're living with 2 or 3 other people, and so, and it's hard enough.
Who you don't know for the first time, right? It's not your brothers and sisters; they're strangers.
And you're learning how, wow, that's interesting. How their cultural makeup and background and their life experiences at that age, and they're meshing to go. Wow, everyone has a story to share, and it's kind of that first platform. Like, wow, this is a bigger world. It's not just my own community. Another special thing is that the program has a very strong diversity makeup. So, and that's through our partners. We have partners in Imperial Valley to Central Valley, local programs that we're very proud of with Reality Changers and other nonprofits, foster youth. So the beauty about this program is the kids come in and they're just them. They're being able to engage because of their content and their mindsets, what they bring in terms of their attributes and skills and knowledge and abilities, and they get to compete.
How long is the program?
So for this one's 3 weeks. There's other programs, other colleges, but 3 to 4 is kind of like the magic for summer, because there's so much going on for high school students right now. And I should note that this phenomenon of pre-college is not a UC-centric thing. It's emerging at other campuses, and it's really something our chancellor is putting a lot of focus and expectation on us. But schools like Harvard, Stanford, UCLA, Brown, they're also realizing that they've got to get earlier into the pipeline to start inspiring the next generation, not just to get into college, but in our world, we also not just looking at college students getting into from diverse backgrounds, but we're also women. That's why we actually are so proud to make salaried science the home at UC San Diego, because we understand women also is another target that we want to inspire them to go into the sciences and be successful in STEM careers as well.
Before we get into STEM or STEAM, what year in high school is best to apply for that? Is it between your junior, senior, or after your senior? Or
we recommend actually sophomore.
Oh, sophomore.
Yeah.
Oh.
Even earlier. And freshmen, sophomores, because that early on engagement has made a big difference. What we hear from the counselors and what we hear from the students is, if they can get engaged with this high level at the sophomore or even freshman level, things start making sense when they're in high school. So we hear a lot about, wow, I went into the chemistry class, but after being at UCSD, it kind of pulled together. Mm-hmm. What we found with seniors just get weird. they're at a
Well,
point.
and hopefully they've already made their conclusion, right, or what
At that point, they pretty
they're
much
going to do.
That's exactly right. At that point, they've had some idea, but they want to go into college. Are they going to do the gap year? Are they going to be doing other things that in their planning? But senior years, they've already been checking off all those boxes, and
We may have lost them by then. huh?
we may have. And ironically, some of the brightest students have a tough time in that realm because they're so smart, and sometimes they've already checked off all the boxes that they need to get admitted. And that's where we see more and more of those types of students going into a community college and taking courses while they're in high school senior year, and also working with us and that's actually kind of a nice thing because we're finding with some of those students, they're actually to take some college level courses during the senior year. It's lowering the amount of courses that they take when they get admitted. So it's almost a time to completion issue that they're actually to advance and get some of those general credits done.
Yeah, well, let's spend a little time on this because as an employer, on your resume, I ask where you graduated from college, right? What university did you go to that you graduated from? I don't ask where you took your freshman and sophomore years. So community colleges is a wonderful asset. And we talked about students graduating with debt. The reality is it's if you can live at home or a cheap apartment with 12 roommates and go to community college and still work, you may have your freshman and sophomore year paid for, and then you transfer to university. And that's all I care on the resume is the employer, where you graduated. UC San Diego, yeah, that's great. SDSU, that's great. I don't ask your years. So people need to know that. If you're not quite ready for the profound flexibility of leaving home and living on a campus with 30,000 other young people that can be very distracting, think about that concept because it does work.
I'm a big fan of our system in California, the Clark Kerr Master Pyramid of Higher Education. I think about Tim White. Tim White is now the head of the state system, and I got to know him when he was Chancellor Riverside, and he's a product of an individual that came from humble beginnings, international, came into this country, went to community college, got an education, stepped into the state system, then ended up getting his PhD, and went all the from the community college to the state schools to UC system, then became Chancellor of Riverside and now head of the entire state system.
Overachiever.
It's just amazing, and he talks about all those experiences. It's not just an economic, but to your point, our system's built that there's different entry points. And more than ever, I have to tell you, transfer students are so important, not just for UC, but across the country, because those students are hungry. They've done a lot of work, and we're seeing a lot of promise that those are just as important, the students, to make sure we grab and recruit and retain as our incoming freshmen.
And they're going into the meat of the university, you know, that junior and senior year,
Yes.
and got the basics out of the way somewhere else. So it's a great. Let's get back to Sally Ride Institute. Tell us more about that.
Well, Sally Ride is one of our icons. She was a professor at UC San Diego. She came to UC after a stellar career as the first American woman astronaut that went into space. And she was an icon for so many women who said, wow.
And then came back to the university,
Yes.
right, after she...
So she initially did her undergrad at Stanford, saw an ad in the paper, said we were looking for astronauts. She applied. She was part of a cohort of last woman or man standing, and just ends up that she was the one selected to advance into as the first American woman into space. But more than that, she became an iconic leader for education. And towards the end of her career, her number one passion was outreach and education for youth, hence Sally Ride Science. So that was a private company, and at the end of her, when she finished up with NASA and started Sally Ride Science, it became known with Tam O'Shaughnessy, the co-founder, her partner, and some other founders came together and said, you know, we're going to really do everything we can to not only promote women in STEM, but they had a professional development, they had books that talk about a whole STEM careers. So they're really robust. But after Sally had passed away, a decision had to be made. How do we sustain this?
How do you keep her legacy going, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So as a professor, there was a couple campuses. In California, there was some other campuses that are north of us.
They were vying for?
Exactly. So our chancellor was smart, and I got a phone call and said, how do we make this work? how do you take over
I want this.
how do you make a for-profit company back in and pull it into a university? But we did it, and so we're very proud to call Salary Ride Science at UCSD as a platform both locally and nationally and globally now with our PD and carrying on that legacy to not only just showcase great science, but creating a farm system and a talent pipeline for women to see, I can be that. You know, Sally always used to say, you can't beat what you can't see. You can't beat what you can't see. And us having Salary Ride Junior Academies in the summer, which I got to tell you, San Diego Unified and Cindy Martin and her leadership, she basically said, this is so important. I'm going to give you Mission Bay High School just to house this because we were saying we had so much demand for women that want to go in. So this last year, 800 young women were for 4 weeks in the morning and afternoon doing a variety of different workshops, whether it was messy science or engineering design or Python programming, all these different workshops that students could go
girls.
into. Boys got there too.
Okay.
And this is interesting because if it was a guy, people would say, oh, girls and guys can go. But a lot of questions come up, oh, it's a Salary Ride thing, it's just for girls, but no.
What year does the Salary Ride Science?
So it's mid-school and high school. So in this
Middle
case,
school?
We actually have middle school courses that are more introduction into some of the sciences where they can really kind of get a try-on of different areas, whether it's geology or some of the other physics and other things. But it's not on that level where they're...
And see that it's not scary.
That's it.
You know, physics and chemistry and all
Fun.
these statistics. First of all, how are they relevant to what I think I want to study? Because in early high school or middle school, you have no clue. You'll change your mind 20 times. But the relevancy of learning and the fun in enjoying learning is the key skill to take away. And by the way, it's on fascinating science and coding and interesting topics.
And that's where the STEAM comes in. And then when Salary Ride came to campus, that was a big platform that we had already kind of structured into not only having STEAM as a framework that we use, but at UCTV, the STEAM channel has just taken off, which we have documentaries on all different science projects and things that teachers and educators can use. But it really is this hands-on. It's not just science, but it's fun. It's being able to try this on and say, gosh, this is actually pretty cool.
Nobody in my family's ever been a scientist or been a mathematician or been an engineer, but I can do it, right? And it's empowering to do that. If I were a parent or a child listening to this, would I go to the UC San Diego website?
precollege.ucsd.edu. And under that precollege.ucsd.edu, you'll find not only Salary Ride Science, but a whole host of other programs we do, which include STEAM education, test prep, the summer residential experiences, and also some of the programs we haven't talked about that we do field research for high school students in other areas outside the state, like Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Biosphere 2 in Tucson, Arizona, and Catalina Island. There's other offerings that have a menu that fit your child.
That's great. That's great. Ed, thanks for joining us. And the reason I wanted Ed on this show is the number of things that wonderful universities like UC San Diego are providing out there, not just for college students, which is their mantra, but we started with middle school, high school students to prepare them to make choices in their life and to be prepared and lifelong learning and to enjoy learning. And we need to be aware of all these programs. And so go to the website, check it out. If it's right for you or your children, then more power to you. Take advantage of it. It's all about preparing them for that career that's going to come screaming up to them very fast, much faster than they thought. And how do we prepare students at all ages to know what their options are and how many options they have, and develop that confidence that they can do this, they can go to college when it's right in their life to do it and succeed by their definition. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next segment.